Looking for a place to speak your truth? This podcast is on an endless pursuit to build through entrepreneurship, empowerment, and creativity. Through thought-provoking content and a fearlessness to dive into untouched topics with an undeniable dedication to highlighting others who are often overlooked. This is Deep Conversations.
Stay tuned for Deep Conversation Podcast.
Welcome to Deep Conversations Podcast. Today, I am blessed here to have Husein Yatabarry.
Yes.
Husein Yatabarry, and it's for me. This is special for me because this is a different avenue that that a lot of people they don't. There's a lot of things that's going on, a lot of narratives in the Muslim community, and I'm glad to have you on. That you can set the record straight and things that we can talk about and things that you've been through. So for people who don't know who you are, I want to start from the beginning with your childhood and just explain a little bit about what you can remember from that.
Oh man. Thanks for having me.
Mm-hmm.
Husein Yatabarry, I'm a Bronx kid, man.
Yeah.
I was born in Harlem Hospital. Spent a couple days there, but I'm a Bronx kid through and through. I grew up in the Tremont section of the Bronx. Actually spent six years in the Tremont section of the Bronx. Born to Gambian parents. The Gambia is like one of the smallest countries in the world, I guess. It's the smallest country in mainland Africa for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Small population, about 3 million, but my parents decided to immigrate to the United States just because of opportunity. All right. My dad came here in 87. My mom followed him in 91. They left 4 children in Gambia. So my older siblings were all born back home in Gambia. I was the first child of theirs in the United States. So, that comes with a lot of pressure. It's like you're first to be born in a westernized world, get that free education and all of those things in order to make it to college. But my childhood was good, man. It was I grew up in a home where I got to learn about my culture. Like I said, my dad came maybe 5 years before I was born.
Mm-hmm.
So my native language of Soninke, that was what I learned first before I learned English. So when I actually started school in kindergarten, I was in ESL. English was my second language, even though I was born in the United States. I spoke to my parents in Soninke. All the friends I had in my building and community spoke Soninke.
Mm-hmm.
So I really got a chance to learn a language fluently. I got a chance to learn more about the culture. My dad I'm Muslim, so my dad would take me to mosque all the time with him.
Mm-hmm.
I would go to the mosque. I would go pray in the mosque with him. I would learn how to read the Quran. But I think it was really nice that I got a chance to really do a deep dive into my culture until the age of 5 with little input from the outside world, outside of my culture.
Mm-hmm.
So it was really powerful and it really set a really good foundation for me.
Mm-hmm. Now you we all have struggles growing up, you know what I mean? And for me, I felt a little connection with you because reading your when I was going over your information, I seen that coming in you grew up getting teased and bullied and stuff like that, and I think a lot of kids go through that, you know what I mean? Can you just explain just the struggles that you had to go through with that? Because for me, being at home, growing up at home, none of that goes on. So then when you go out into the world and see that as a young kid, that plays a mental, it plays a mental game on you. So can you just explain that a little bit?
It's completely real. Growing up at home, I grew up with my younger brother. We would beat each other up and fight, but it didn't come from no place of hate, no place of bias. It's just older brother, little brother, civil rivalry stuff. But when it comes to the outside world, I think when you look at a lot of African communities back in the early 90s, into the 2000s, we were brand new communities to a lot of places in America. So especially in New York, we were a small growing population. So people took it upon themselves to paint us with stereotypes and narratives. Then add the fact that I'm also Muslim on top of that. And
Mm-hmm.
then you have events like 9/11 happen, the Iraq War, the
Mm-hmm.
war in Afghanistan, the war on terror. My name is Husein. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
kind of compile that to the fact that I'm a black African, and the black man already gets the most criticized,
Mm-hmm.
have the most negative stereotypes against them already. So it was just kind of conflated the issue for me. So for me growing up, that looked like dealing with the term African booty scratcher, because I
Yeah.
happen to be African. Yeah, he's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
he's
Yep.
like,
I
I
heard
know the
that.
pain. Just hearing it, getting into fights, getting into issues with other students, it kind of takes away and distracts from your actual education,
Yeah. Yep.
because you feel like you have to defend yourself.
Mm-hmm.
School kind of becomes secondary, defending myself and my identity and not trying to get lost in that. And there were times as a kid where I sat down and almost like, yo, like, damn, like, do I love being African? Like,
Mm-hmm.
there were times I know what I questioned as a kid, like, do I love being African?
Mm-hmm.
Because like this comes with so much, and I don't really know what being African or being Gambian has done to anyone else, but it seems like people really have it out for us.
Mm-hmm.
So it does create like sort of an identity crisis for you, because you don't know if you love the culture you come from, because you don't know where the animus is coming from, but there's a lot of negative energy coming towards you from somewhere. And people are being taught this either at home or through media, but
Mm-hmm.
it's out there for people to learn and say, nah, I don't like you, or I don't like your kind because of
Mm-hmm.
where you're from and the religion you practice. Man, 9/11 happened. It was crazy to be Muslim. I mean, talking about I was like around 9 years old, going to the mosque, being in my mosque, and my mosque was getting egged.
Mm-hmm.
We had a mob outside of our mosque talking about you guys shouldn't be on this block anymore. Like police being involved and saying people have the right to their religion, but like it was just, I just saw that people were very misinformed and people were very ignorant.
Mm-hmm.
And like the only solution to ignorance is through education, because people just have a lot of miseducation, and that's the root of the problem. That's why people are so anti-black. That's why people are so anti-African. That's why people
Mm-hmm.
are so anti-Muslim. They don't know anything about these groups.
Mm-hmm. And it's I'm glad you brought that up, because you said you kind of questioned your ethnicity of did you really want to be African? And it's funny because us over here in the States, we don't understand, even a lot of black people,
Yeah.
we don't understand that culture. And it's like we yearn for that so much, to understand that culture. And then when we have Africans over here, it's like I don't know, it's like a play on each other. Like it's just to
Oh
take
man.
the negativity off of you. You try to throw it on somebody else.
Like the big thing with that, I feel like the powers that be, like they got the structure of the crab in the barrel so
Mm-hmm.
perfect that you got, you know, these different crabs from like some from the Caribbean and some from Africa and some from the
Mm-hmm.
United States and some from Europe, but it's all black people at the end of the day. Like,
Yeah. Yep.
my friend loves to use the term like we're all Pan-African, like we all have roots to the motherland in Africa. We're all black people, but that geography and ethnicity is used to divide us and like make us. What are our differences? We're the most subjugated people on the planet.
Mm-hmm.
That to me, that's the time factor of like really connecting together and saying, hey, we must speak up for what's right and we must speak up for what's just.
Mm-hmm.
But there's just been things that's been planted all over the place. The immigrants are coming through to take your jobs. The immigrants are coming through with a new way of living. It's gonna irreparably shape America for the worse. So
Mm-hmm.
then you have like, African Americans saying like, damn, like these African brothers want to come through and like do something to us. Then you got Africans being told on the other side that are immigrating, oh, African Americans are who you got to watch out for. Look at the crime statistics. Most of the people that are in jail are African Americans. When the African immigrant doesn't know about the history of systemic racism, mass
Mm-hmm.
incarceration, and how that's like literally an economic machine for the United States. But like I said, a lot of it just comes from ignorance. When
Mm-hmm.
you don't know anything about people, especially where you're immigrating to, or where new people are coming and arriving from different countries are immigrating from, you have a recipe for disaster where people are
Yep.
just looking at each other and ready to like just shoot each other down, like
Mm-hmm.
figuratively, because you don't know anything about that person but the stereotypes that are put out there.
Yep.
And like we really gotta look at who's putting out these stereotypes. No one knows the source, but these are common stereotypes.
Yep. They
The the black criminal, the African booty scratcher, the
mm-hmm.
Muslim terrorist has been put out there. So we really gotta like sit down and say, hey, yes, I've been taught these stereotypes, but who created them? Where are they from?
Mm-hmm.
Not true.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that because quick story before before
Yeah.
I get into the next question. One of my brothers, he's married to a Haitian woman, and
Mm.
they, some years ago she was working to get her papers, and when she got her papers, she was telling us, we were all sitting around, we went out to dinner, we were all sitting around, and she said, what's crazy to me? She said, it was like an auditorium they had to be in when they had to, like a celebration or whatever. She said, but in that auditorium, that celebration, they showed us a video of America
Mm.
and, how America was, what America was. But then she said there was a part in the movie where of what they told you of who to stay away from. And she
Wow.
said who the thugs were, she said, and it was all black people. She said that's why when people come from different countries, they look at you like that. She said because of, like you said, the stereotype of
Yeah.
just that's the system of what the United States does to keep you. If they can keep you focused on one thing, you're not going to turn around and look at what's going on. So, but how has your culture and your upbringing helped you succeed to get you to where you are today?
I think my culture has like I come from a very community oriented culture. So the Soninke people, we come from like the villages of Gambia and like very community oriented people. I would say like when you go to Gambia, Gambia has its problems. It has massive poverty. There's some leadership issues, but one thing I would say is the people genuinely love each other.
Mm-hmm.
I would say people who are even the most destitute and homeless, like they will come into your yard and you will eat together. My first time going to Gambia, I was 6 years old. That's the first time I saw literally people that were homeless and destitute, unhoused, coming from outside, and my brother and my mom inviting them inside, and my sisters inviting them inside and say, "Hey, come eat with us." Like literally, there is no place where you cannot get fed in Gambia because we all look at each other like as one. When you also look at the fact that even the unhoused and homeless, they have a yard to sleep in at night. No one really sleeps outside on the street. If you have an awning, people will allow people to come in and sleep under their awnings and then let them like they can leave in the morning just so
Right.
that they're not actually like sleeping on the dirt. So seeing that, I was just like kind of like that's crazy because I'm like I come from the United States of America, New York, the Mecca of the world, and
Yep.
like we don't really I've never really seen a care for people that are less fortunate. I
Mm-hmm.
haven't really seen that kind of humanity and humility that to say like, hey, like I'm gonna treat people well. I'm an observant Muslim who goes through the process of Ramadan and like I fast every year. So I'm about to fast coming up in March 11th.
Mm-hmm.
That's gonna be the first day. But even that culture of Islam and really thinking about the less fortunate, because I started fasting since I was maybe 10, 11 in some capacity. I was cheating every now and then because I was a little kid.
Yeah, kid.
So I wouldn't tell my dad that I was eating a honey bun and coming home, wiping the crumb off my
Yeah.
mouth. But kind of talking to my dad and like telling me, like, yo, you know what Ramadan is really about? Is the chance for us for a month to experience what it's like to be less fortunate. You have to understand this is some people's every day. They don't get to eat from sunrise to sunset, not because they're choosing to or because their religion asks them to, is because they can't afford to. So for us, this 1 month puts us in those shoes that God has given us a blessing, and everything that we have is a blessing. So the water that we drink, that's why when people ask, yo, Muslims, I can't even drink water. Well, water is a blessing and a privilege. There's many
Mm-hmm.
parts of the world where you don't have clean drinking water and you may not drink water for the whole day. So that's it with us. We do get to feast after sunset, but then it's also a call for us to bring in others who are less fortunate to feast with us and to not forget about them after the month of Ramadan is over. We give a lot of charity during the month. There's a lot of volunteering. We, like my organization, Muslim Community Network, we'll get into later, but we
Mm-hmm.
give out a lot of food distributions, hot meals, food pantries, soup kitchens. And that's all part of the calling on me from my culture is order to give back, community orientedness, but it has like clear ties to the religion that we practice. It's about giving back because the way we look at it is everything that we have, even the breath that we take, is literally a blessing. So you have to give it
Yep.
back.
Now, how would you, before we switch gears, how would you encourage others who, like you said, the ones who who are less fortunate? How did you go about encouraging those, that when they're out there and they're not getting no kind of things? Because again, in America, you don't see that kind of thing where people are just reaching out and helping. It's I'm gonna say me. I've been I've been guilty of just walking past and acting like
Yeah.
I don't see people. So how would you encourage those?
Just a regular everyday person. Like I think a lot of it has to do with upbringing and just kind of like some of the things and ethos that were instilled in a person from young. But if you want to kind of change that within yourself, I think you really have to look at just globally, not just in New York or like in America, but globally, what does poverty look like? Because I think I even myself as a young kid took it for granted. We were poor, like poor
Mm-hmm.
by very United States and American standards. Like, yo, I didn't have the latest Jordan, I didn't have the latest Nike, but I never thought about it like, oh, my cousin, like, in the other side of the world is struggling to have shoes. They're struggling to get a sneaker, not the latest one, not the latest Adidas, but just a sneaker, whatever sneaker. If I scoffed at whatever the Shacks or the Marburys, he would
Mm-hmm.
be glad to have those. When I'm looking at that, it's like telling my mom, that's a $35 sneaker. I can't wear that to school. People gonna clown me. Yo, my cousins on the other side of the planet just like, man, they will pray for you if you gave them that $35,
Mm-hmm.
$13 sneaker.
Mm-hmm.
So just kind of really understanding how much you have and understanding that it's also on you to give back. So I think I tell people all the time, like, hey, you could give back through service. Not everything is about money.
Mm-hmm.
It could be as simple as offering somebody, you see job opportunities, there's people that's in need of jobs and sharing that job opportunity, something that's super simple. It
Mm-hmm.
could be something as simple as buying meals and distributing them. Because I understand also we have like huge issues in America with drug problems and different things. So whenever you ask people why you're not giving any money to the less fortunate, people be like, they're gonna use it on drugs. But there's so many other ways you can give back. If that's the only thing that's holding you back, then you don't really want to give back.
Mm-hmm.
Food, there's housing, there's education, there's so
Mm-hmm.
many other frontiers to attack when it comes to poverty and just systemic issues that there's always a way that you can help. No matter what company you in, you could be somebody that's a mover. There's people that's getting evicted every day. You could take your moving truck after
Yep.
you finish work, and let's say one day a week, I'm gonna help one family that gets evicted move their stuff to a shelter or move to a new house. That's gonna be the way I give back. You could be a teacher. The way I'm gonna give back is through tutoring. I'm gonna tutor people's kids, people that can't afford tutors, because we know that literacy and education is really a gateway to like prosperity.
Mm-hmm.
So we all have an opportunity to give back no matter what kind of job we have or career path. It's not always about the money. It could just be you're a good person and
Mm-hmm.
you've undergone a lot in life. Some of the best lessons I learned is from one of our guys. His name is Sabor. He was incarcerated for 15 years, and it's just his wisdom. He didn't offer me money.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't offer me a job, but just having those conversations and just hearing the good word from him about his experience and just helping me realize my freedom is a privilege and a blessing, and like really, really holding on to that and grasping that. So we all have a part to play in giving back. It just really like being intentional and like kind of doing a needs assessment of your own life, your own attributes, and like your own gifts, and how can I give back in that way?
Yeah, that's that was that's good, man. I might use that for the I might use that for the clip of the little snippet I usually put. So that was good. But switching gears, you graduated with a degree in biology and you minored in psychology.
Yeah.
So what was it about those two that kind of piqued your interest?
So I'll give you like a raw and authentic insight. Psychology is something that I ended up choosing afterwards that I actually did end up really loving. But biology, brother, I'll be honest, I come from an African household, and my African parents really wanted a doctor or lawyer, like engineer son.
Yeah.
And I was really good at the sciences in high school, so I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna do biology and try to be a doctor.
Mm-hmm.
That's just the honest truth of it. It it was my choice. Like my parents wouldn't have faulted me if I chose any other thing. But
Mm-hmm.
I think, like the way you love your mom Dukes and like really want to impress them and really want to infringe upon them and make them
Mm-hmm.
happy, like in
Yeah.
that 18 to 19 age, I
Yeah.
really did that bio track for them. It
Mm-hmm.
wasn't until like maybe junior, senior year in, I'm already like, like 30, 40 credits away. So I'm like, I'm too deep in to like really change. But I really kind of like started telling myself, I'm not going to med school. And I made that clear. And that was clear to everybody in my family.
Yeah.
That's I'm going to graduate with this bio degree. I'm in this. I'm taking the organic chemistry. I'm taking all these things. But this med school thing is not happening. I'm going to try to figure out what I'm going to be, whether the clinical trial researcher or a biomedical engineer. I'm going to try to figure out something else, but I don't want to work in a hospital. I did the internship at a hospital, not something I really enjoy. I didn't really enjoy being around the sick. So I didn't really see a
Mm-hmm.
pathway in it for myself. But the psychology piece, I love people. And I think that helped gave me a better understanding into people and why people function the way they do and really understanding trauma. And in that process of doing my psych minor, I learned a lot about myself and why I do things. I think those set of classes actually helped me realize you don't want to do biology. You're doing biology to please others.
Mm-hmm.
Even if those others happen to be your parents, that's not a good reason to do something. There should be something intrinsic within you that's motivating you to go down that path. And there wasn't nothing really intrinsically inside that saying, go be a doctor.
Mm-hmm. I remember I took a few classes in college and psychology was one of them. And
Yeah.
it's something about that when you're learning about, the mind and the habits of,
Yeah.
the human person. It's like that stuff is really interesting, man. It's like, and like you said, it teaches you why people act the way they act and certain things like that. And I liked it. I mean, I never finished because my mind then was just like, I want to do other stuff. So it was like
Yeah.
I never really stayed. But I was reading again, after college, what inspired you to pursue education and leadership?
So like I said before, I didn't want to be a doctor. So like I'm
Mm-hmm.
sitting here, I got this bio degree burning a hole in my pocket. And I don't know what to do. So I actually started talking to some friends, talked to one person. So there's a couple of friends at City College, Diana and some others who actually they were in the education major and they decided to go into education. So they were like, if you don't know what to do, don't just sit around with this bio degree. You know a lot about science, and science was a passion of yours.
Mm-hmm.
Like it wasn't that science wasn't a passion of yours. You just don't want to do this specific jobs. So how about education? So I give you like a quick background. Before in high school and college, I was working at the New York Public Library, and I was working in the on young adult and the children's division. I would do read alouds with kids. I would do summer programming for kids. So they kind of just saw like, oh, you love working with kids. And even when I was thinking about being in the doctor's track, I always thought about being a pediatrician because I
Mm-hmm.
always thought about giving back to the youth. That was always like part of my big thing. So they were
Mm-hmm.
like, you could teach science at elementary school. I think that's something that's up your alley. I'm like, I don't know. There was like, what do you have to lose? So I really didn't have anything to lose, and I kind of had no direction.
Mm-hmm.
So applied for a job, and I got into education with the sense that I'm gonna do the best with what I have with this bio degree, and I think education will be like a nice middle road for me for my pursuit that I wanted to do as a pediatrician with this science background, I could be a science teacher. And like, I think my goal then was I'm gonna help other young kids like actually learn about science, but empower them to like get into the science field because we need more black people and black and brown people in tech, more black and brown people in the medicines, more black and brown people in chemistry, creating products. And that's not there. But if there's a black and brown face telling you, teaching you about science, knowledgeable about science, and telling you it's a great field to go into and telling you about some of the job prospectus, that could be a young kid that actually is intrinsically motivated to be in the sciences long term
Yep.
versus me, who it was just to please someone else. So that's how I got into education. I got into education in 2016, and man, I don't regret it. Working with those young people for those 7 years, I think it left a huge impact on me. Every single child that I taught, like they really left an impression, but it was really a lot of love, and it was just that giving back to community, like coming back to that topic. I was being able to give back to community, and I think I realized how much I love that. Like I got to like really benefit families. Family was so happy that their children were learning and like they were growing and they were going through this transformational change. Because even a lot of the young men that I taught, you know, their moms would come to me, their pops would come to me like, hey, like they really enjoy their class and they say like, you know, you have a good sense of like being warm, but also being strict and not letting them kind of give up, not letting them throw everything away because they want to play around. But because I understand as a black man, if you're not educated, you know, this world would discard you. So like, I'm not going to let you sit in this class and not get something out of it. When you're in my class for this 45 minutes to an hour, you're going to get the most out of it. That's all I can give you.
So speaking on your with that with the young community, how has it been navigating and building pride into young Muslims?
I think that's so I didn't realize. So fast forward from my own childhood to teaching, you know, I haven't really been in a school environment, a public school environment. So I kind of didn't realize, like, man, I, kids are still getting bullied for being Muslim. Kids are still going through a lot of things because they happen to be Muslim, and or they happen to be African because that's a part of my identity that people really obviously have a lot of negativity towards. So for me, it's like sitting down with young men and women who are African, West African, or Muslim, and like really telling them to be proud of themselves, really trying to really empower them and say, hey, don't listen to what people are saying, but also engaging with the school communities I worked at. That's how I really worked my way into teacher leadership as to how can we help kind of combat some of these issues that schools have had, because it seems like our students don't really understand enough about others. So while I was at schools before I stopped teaching, I was a team lead. I worked specifically with a grade level and a grade band. When issues came through, student facing issues, I would coordinate with all teachers on the team in order to make sure this is a problem that solves across the grade. And then also we would have weekly sit down with the principal to talk about some of the problems happening in our grade. Push it up the ladder, like, hey, this is a problem that's happening throughout the school, and this is a problem that we need to confront. And I think going through that process really helped me see, like, you know, I had the ability to be a leader in those environments and be an advocate for Muslim students, Muslim families, and also like African families, because I also say in African families because you could be Muslim and really understand the structures of the United States well and how to operate and speak the language. But a lot of West African families may be Muslim or may not be, but don't speak the language. There's language access barriers and don't understand the culture well. And people don't understand their culture well. So bridging those gaps, even though I'm only Gambian, I know a little bit about many African nations and like some of the cultures and customs. But also I would just ask them, simply not just assuming that I know because I'm happen to be Gambian, but asking them, because at the end of the day, I'm still second generation Gambian. I wasn't born there. Even my understanding of the cultural norms of Africa comes through like my representation of the diaspora, but that doesn't necessarily mean I know it all. So also not assuming I know it all and like pushing my schools that I worked at to also do some homework with bridging the gap with families, building those relationships with families and understanding them a lot better. So as a teacher and educator, I led Ramadan presentations school-wide at school-wide assemblies to teach all the schools and all educators about the month of Ramadan and about Islam and why Muslims celebrate this month, just to kind of bridge the gap. And like kids are like, oh, wow, I didn't know a lot of these things. And like just pique kids' interest in just learning more about your peer, more learning about your peer's family, more learning more about your Muslim teacher. So that was where I could be an advocate and like really be intentional about bridging the gap between my cultural identities and the larger cultural identity of New York City.
Do you find being in the school system that, like you said before, you had to bring it to people's attention and then you had to kind of push it forward? Do you find that if you don't say certain things, that a lot of stuff kind of gets
It'll
brushed
be
under the rug?
because doing the work is not easy. Doing the work is not easy. It's very difficult. Not doing the work is like that's like the status quo. It's like, hey, I know we got some Muslim students, but we don't got no presentation, so we're not gonna do anything about it. It's cool. Or there's this thing coming up, or we have this issue, but let's just deal with it how we deal with every other problem instead of being personalized and differentiating it. Because really taking the time to understand the challenges that you have and creating that solution, that may take weeks of work or even months of work. And for a lot of administrators, they don't want to dive in.
Yeah, they don't want to do it.
Because if I have to do that with this one challenge, then I got to do it for all the challenges. And they look at it as like, that's not the most time effective for me. So I just don't want to even broach the subject at all. So it is frustrating from being from within inside the system and having to be that advocate for your community. But for educators or anybody in any field, when you're inside a system, you have to be that advocate for your community. If you see there's a need of your community, you can't just sit there and not say anything. Because at the end of the day, who else will be emboldened or empowered enough to? Oftentimes in school communities, parents don't even really know what's going on. They're at the morning, they're at dismissal, but the inner workings of the day, they're not there for those 8 hours to really realize like, hey, we have an issue that we have to address as far as inclusivity. So that's something I'm seeing from inside and bringing that to people's attention. Like, hey, we have an inclusivity problem. This is a problem that's going to grow, and telling them that it's a problem that is eventually going to get to parents' attention, and then it's going to become a huger problem that you're going to have external factors coming in and wanting to know why this problem has persisted for so long. So it is difficult. It is frustrating. I mean, and it's also part of the reason why eventually, like, I did leave education, because I did see being an external advocate, it was more advantageous for the community as a whole. And from where I stood from, the nonprofit sector and like the ability I had not to be confined and constricted to the parameters of, and the regulations of the Department of Education. And like, these things take months or even years to kind of institute. When I'm in the nonprofit sector, we could create a plan and just kind of go and implement it. And that's kind of started getting my mind tweaking. Like, I can still be a lifelong educator, but I could do it outside of education and really be an advocate for education, but an advocate for a whole list of issues and a bunch of topic ranges. And I mean, honestly, that's where I ended up going. But education provided me that insight to that community work.
So sometimes I think when we're dealing with the schools and stuff, like you said, and trying to teach people more about, our culture and stuff, sometimes I don't think they know how to go about it and to how to navigate. And I think that's a lot of times why they just kind of just brush it under the rug. So how important I think a lot of times you may have to go a different way, which I think you're going that way. But so how important do you think it is for the youth and the young people to be more involved in the community and to do different things to kind of help, to kind of help each other, and then let it be known, and it'll be easier for schools and things to to go about that?
So I think that's one of the most important things. Thank you for bringing that up. We do all of this in service for them. Even administrators who maybe lacks a lot around a lot of these things, I want to believe majority of them got into education for the right purposes to really benefit our children. Now, how every administrator and educator goes about that obviously is different based on your capacity, but really getting youth involved to be advocates for themselves is really the approach. Being student-centered in education. I think there's a whole movement now, just in education as a whole, towards being student-centered, towards being inquiry-based, posing the questions to students and having them think of the answers for them. Because at the end of the day, we have to make sure those students are safe. We have to make sure those students feel the most comfortable in the environments so they can learn.
Yep.
You can't do that if you don't actually take in their input and their feedback. And oftentimes as adults, we prescribe our methodology and our way of thinking to the students, to the young people, without actually taking their feedback is that this how you want to be best approached, best communicated with? And do you think this is the best kind of curriculum for you? Is this the best modality that you're going to learn in? We don't really ask a lot of these questions. We just assume based on our own research that this is the way to go. And I think that's why the state of education is such a crisis. There's not enough youth and student feedback inside of our educational system. So that's something like actually we're working on at my organization now, Muslim Community Network. We have a youth fellowship. We have 2 cohorts a year. We work on getting teaching students about organizing, about advocacy at a legislative level, and how they can connect with their local council members, how they can connect with their state assemblymen, and if they have projects or initiative that they want to institute, how to go about it. We actually even took them to City Hall in January. They met Councilwoman Shahana Hanif, who's the first Muslim city council member in New York City. She took them on a tour. She took them on a legislative day in action and actually taught them about legislative policy in New York City and how it works. And it was one of the most impactful days for those youth. Some of them actually went back and instituted some projects in their schools. One of our students, Malin, she did a sock drive. Another one with some of the students from his school, they cooked food in his house and gave it to some of the migrants that are in some of the shelters in their neighborhood. You have students actually like say, hey, I can give back to my community. I can go back to my school and involve my community, my school community into a larger community. And I think that's a lot of, that's really a solution. School communities need to get more involved in the larger holistic community outside of the school. If you don't understand the geography of your region as a school and as an administrator or superintendent, how can you serve them the best? You can't. You're making a lot of assumptions instead of actually going out and say, I'm taking feedback from the community, seeing what the needs are, because those same needs in that larger community are the needs of your students and their families.
Now, I want to jump into the MCN, the Muslim Community Network, because as I was reading over your bio, you know, this is huge.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? This is something that, you know, to me, you know, this is something to where you can actually spread your wings and bring others along, you know, with you. And again, like you were just saying, you know, teaching the youth. But what is your with this network? What is your overall goal?
Yeah.
And
Thank you
vision,
for that
I should
question.
say.
I really appreciate that. I mean, with Muslim Community Network, short for MCN, the goal is to redefine and shape the narrative around being Muslim in the United States through community education, leadership development, and advocacy. I think one big way that MCN did that last year was by hiring me, the first Black African executive director they've ever had in their 20-year history. Yeah, I think when we think about Muslims, people often think about Arabs or South Asians. They think about brown people and oftentimes forget about the Black African Muslim and the Black Caribbean Muslim, the Black African Americans who, when you think about the history of Islam in the United States, the first Black men and women on the soils of the United States were Muslim. They were often taken from West Africa. The story of Kunta Kinte, when you think about roots in Alex Haley, you're talking about Kunta Kinte, a black man from the Gambia, practicing Muslim, who was forced into Christianity. But we have to understand the first enslaved people in the United States, many of them were Muslims, taken away from their religion. Even when you go to the Smithsonian Museum in DC, they actually even have like a part of the exhibit that talks about a Muslim enslaved writing in Arabic, writing his narrative, his journey being taken from Africa into the United States, and how that impacted him. And he eventually converted to Christianity because it was so difficult to try to be a practicing Muslim when you have a white man telling you that you literally can't. And every time I see you doing that, I am going to beat you.
Yep.
I am going to hurt you until you abide by my rules. So
That's crazy.
within all that, like taking in that history and like really realizing that at MCN, my focus is one, to bridge the gap between Muslim communities, because I understand there's a lot of division within Muslim communities themselves. Like we talked about earlier with Black people as a whole and where you come from and how there's that bickering and back and forth between communities. Even in the Muslim community, we've been put against each other.
Yep.
And somehow it's like one person's version of Islam and it's like better than another. How is that? Again, division is always sown by people in power to say, oh, these are the good Muslims.
Yep.
These people from these countries, those are the bad Muslims. Those are the terrorist Muslims. Nah, there's just one Islam, and you're all practicing in service of Allah. But making sure that people from different groups, whether it's Arab Muslims, South Asians, Black Muslims, like we can all really connect and really do some work for our community. Making sure we can connect in harmony, making sure we can connect and better understand each other. Because even though we're all Muslims, we have very extremely different cultures. The way my family practices from Gambia is going to be a little bit different from Senegal, which is the next country right over, and the way they practice Islam is going to be different than Saudi Arabia. It's going to be a little different in Bangladesh. It's going to be different for a Puerto Rican Muslim that's practicing on the island, because your culture is interwoven into religion, right? Yep. Even when you look at certain churches down south, Baptist churches, and you see them and they go into songs and they have large gospel choirs. You go to other denominations, they don't have any of that. They're more rigid, they're more structured. They're like, nah, we don't really get into the sing song in our church. Same thing in Islam. There's a wide range and birth of what it means to be Muslim, but that's something that people really don't understand from the outside. And that's something that's completely not accepted from the inside. Some people be like, nah, but we have to really connect together. That's how you're going to be able to really build power and fight for justice for your community. But then also connecting Muslim communities is the second part of my job to the outside community, whether it's interfaith partners of other religions, city, state, and federal government agencies to really recognize us, understand us, and when there's issues going on in our community, to say, hey, what you did there or what you said there was a problem, and this is the way and the path we can go about resolving it. Really being an advocate for our larger Muslim community. You're talking about a Muslim community that's 4 million Muslims in the United States and growing. In New York City alone, New York City has a million Muslims across the 5 boroughs. So that's just in New York City. Across the state, there's about 700,000 more Muslims upstate and in Long Island. So you have to really think about it. There's a lot of power in our numbers. You're talking about whether it's the food industry, the service industry, the transportation industry. A lot of it is serviced by Muslims. Then you go into hospitals. You're talking about 10% of pharmacists happen to be Muslim. You have about 8% of doctors in New York City happen to be Muslim. So you really have a large driving force of Muslims really driving this city and its economy. But sometimes they're not always recognized and they're not always respected because of stereotypes coming in from the outside. And like, it's my job as executive director to dismantle that.
So in your opinion, I'm glad you said that. In your opinion, what do you think needs to be done to combat a lot of these hate crimes and a lot of these different stereotypes that are going on in the Muslim community?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's like we battling it from 2 fronts. Is the conversation and interaction piece. I think the initial part of that is people just haven't interacted with a lot of communities. So that's why there's a lot of hate. I'm going based off what I seen on TikTok, Instagram,
Yep.
Twitter, on the news. Based off that, I'm going to make my assumption about this group of people, and I'm going to harbor hate in my heart for these group of people. So really starting from there and like making sure we interact with communities, but being an open door for other communities to learn more about Muslims. Like when I go and share anything about our community, we often are met with other community members and nonprofit organizers who like, yo, I work with the Mexican community. We don't know a lot about Muslims, but we have Muslim neighbors. We don't know about them. Can you come and talk to us about what it means to be Muslim, how you practice? And when you do these sessions, people end up finding out you have more similarity in your struggles as an immigrant group and a minority group than you have as differences. Like you have the tiny difference of, I pray this way and I call Allah God, but you call him Jesus or Cristo. That's minor differences. Our religions are really grounded in morality. We really want the best things for our family, education. We want good housing. We want safety for our families. We all really want the same things at the end of the day. So once people kind of realize that, you really eliminate like a huge sector of like when it comes to bias related incidents. People are like, oh, I have a better understanding of Muslims, and what I've seen online, I can objectively say is not true. But until you have those interactions and that discourse, it's really, really difficult in order to dismantle those stereotypes in people's minds. The second area is education. So what we do as a program, we do diversity education, which is going out into communities that are not traditionally Muslim and teaching them about us in the most respectful way, but the most accurate way. We also provide education for our own communities called hate crime prevention workshops, where we teach our communities how to advocate for themselves and protect themselves if they ever met with a violent encounter or harassment encounter, and what are the steps they should take within the Muslim community when those things happen. Because obviously our community has a large immigrant population that is scared of law enforcement and police due to immigration factors. So oftentimes hate crimes against Muslims go underreported. People oftentimes just go back home and say, why bother? Because this police case may lead to an immigration case or may lead to deportation. Even though it doesn't, there's a lot of misinformation around that. So people just won't go. The last frontier in education that we're tackling is advocacy. In New York City right now, we have a resolution called Resolution 95 that's in the New York City Council. We're asking the New York City Department of Education for public schools to bring in a broad-based religious diversity curriculum into schools for students and staff. For us, going to every single community and doing a workshop obviously is great, but holistically, the New York City public education system has 1 million kids. This is the future of our city and the future of our country.
Yep.
If we can teach them about religious diversity from when they're 5 through 18, those students are going to leave, and anything they see negative in the media about groups from whether it's Bangladesh or whether it's Gambia or whether it's Israel or whether it's this country, whether it's Vatican City, they're going to say, oh no, I learned about this group and this is the truth of the matter. Whatever they're saying on social media or whatever person's trying to perpetuate hate, I'm not going to acknowledge them, because since I was 5 years old, I was learning about different religious groups, why they practice, and how they're a good member of society. And now I can actually discern. I have better media literacy when it comes to religious groups, and when people say harmful things about them, I can actually combat that and be a good upstander, as opposed to organizations on the ground trying to meet every single act of hate with reaction. We want to be proactive and get our schools to really put a curriculum together and teach together to teach to our kids so they can be more inclusive toward the neighbors. Whether you are a Christian child, a Jewish child, or a Muslim child, Sikh, Hindu, Buddhist, you're going to know about all the kids in your class, how they practice, what they practice. And when their events are coming up, you may want to attend at their temple or their mosque or at their church, because you know a lot more about it. You know the most respectful way to come to them and address them when it's their time of the year. You
Mm-hmm.
know the phrases to say when it's Eid or when it's Christmas or when it's Yom Kippur. You know what to say because you've been taught it. It's not about like trying to push religion onto kids. It's how do you interact with people from religious backgrounds, because it's part of their identity. No
Yeah.
matter what, you can't really separate it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a Muslim, I don't stop being Muslim at the door of my school building and walk in just as Husein. I'm
Mm-hmm.
Husein, who's the African, who's a black man, who's a Muslim, who is a brother. So all these things are part of my identity. They don't just get stripped away because I walk into a place. But if people understand that part of my religion, we don't have to have active conversations about it every day, but it's gonna make me feel more comfortable inside the school environment. And and then when I grow up, I get out of school, I'm interacting with other kids in high school and college and the workforce from other backgrounds. I already have a background knowledge into other people's faiths and their traditions and their cultures.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel better talking to them. I don't feel on edge about, oh, how do I say this? Nah, I already know it. Just like I know math, just like I know English, I know science. I already know a little bit about your culture.
Mm-hmm. So I got two more questions,
Yeah.
but before I do that, I told you I was going to toot your horn because your achievements are they're really really impressive. You know what I mean? And I just want to read off a couple of them. You know what I mean?
All right.
You were recognized and nominated for the prestigious Master Teacher
Yes.
Fellowship Program.
Yeah.
So Master Teacher, that sounds like something like KRS-One. Like you a Master Teacher, man. You know what I'm saying? Like that's dope, man.
Shout out to KRS, South Bronx,
Yeah.
South Bronx. You know what I'm saying?
And then you
But when it came to that, that was simply because of like my approach to education, and I think
Mhm.
I was really recognized for that because I really took a relationship-based approach to education, and
Mhm.
I linked that to the actual pedagogy and like lessons in the classroom. I just think that's one aspect of it. I don't think as a kid or family, I want to learn from somebody that doesn't take a chance to know me. So a lot of what I did development wise with my school was how can you build relationships with students and their families, and how do you properly behavior manage a classroom? I
Mhm.
think people often think when it comes to black and brown boys, there's a lot of labels placed on them. The girls too, but specifically the boys, they're rowdy, they're rambunctious, they don't want to listen. Now, breaking that down as a master teacher in my school was to say, have you asked that student about their life? Have
Mhm.
you asked student A about the death that was in their family? Because they told us, but they felt comfortable enough to tell me somebody passed away in my family. I had to tell the team, but they didn't feel comfortable telling you because that relationship is not there. Because you're only looking at the lesson part of education. I come
Mhm.
in, I teach my lesson to you, I assign my homework, and you're out. It's really a 24-hour care job where families are going to reach out when things happen, where families reached out to us when, sad to say, a student of mine, her father was killed in a violent act.
Mhm.
Somebody stole his motorized e-bike, and that was like literally like the reason of like the attack, and he passed away. Families called us immediately, and then we were some of the members to actually call the school and say and tell the principal. The principal wasn't the first to know, but that just depends on the kind of relationship that you have with those families. They're gonna feel comfortable telling, because those aspects of their lives, they affect their education.
Mhm.
If there's things happening in my life and I'm going through mental health troubles because of trauma and family issues, how can I actually learn in this classroom?
Mhm.
Most oftentimes children do their poorest when their families are going through crisis. You need to work with the families in order to resolve these crises as best as possible. Crisis is not going to be all the way resolved, but when students see you taking the best steps as an educator and as a school staff in order to kind of meet them where they're at, that child is going to come to back to school mentally much faster than if you ignore that part of it and just go on as, every day is the same. I'm just going to do my teaching. I'm going to leave at 3:30.
Mhm.
Then you kind of leaving that gap. And that's kind of where I came into the master teacher, was to talk about that holistic piece of children and like really thinking about that, and not just thinking about the academic component of it. They're linked together.
Yeah.
You can't separate them.
So, and then you received the Cardinal Educator of the Year in 2020.
Yeah.
And during COVID, you took on the role of executive director of Neighborhood United.
Yeah.
Was that it? And
Yeah. So yeah.
then you were seated this, and then you were nominated for the Community Leader of the Year at the Senegambia West African Awards in
Yeah.
2021. That's what I'm saying. So for you, these awards, right? And you now at this age, what would you tell little Husein?
Listen to my gut. Listen to yourself. Like, I think a lot of my missteps in life, they're all learning opportunities. But when I often reflect back, I didn't really listen to myself or advocate for myself, because if I really truly listen, I'll be able to say yes or no. And I think oftentimes I just kind of let life take me like I'm on a current, because either I was too hesitant to actually start paddling, or I just didn't have the courage to start paddling. But I think the version of me now, uh, I know a lot more about myself. But I don't think I don't think there's many lessons that I can give to young Hussein, because he still has to go through life. I
Mm-hmm.
think every misstep and every mistake and every failure is the reason I am who I am today. It's the reason I know so much more about myself today. So I would just say, listen to myself, listen to your gut, be authentic to yourself, be true to yourself. Those are the things that you can hold true, are gonna stay with you and stand the test of time. Um, Trying to be someone else or trying to please others, it's not really going to work out.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the authenticity piece. That's what I would tell him. And I would probably still let him make a lot of the same mistakes, because he has to
Yeah.
bump his head a couple more
Yeah.
times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So last question before we get out of here. Well, first of all, I want you to shout out your social media so everybody can, get on there and start following you.
So my social media, my personal is at Yatabarry, at Yatabarry. And the organization I'm an executive director of is at MCNNY. So there's two N's, MCN and then NY for New York. And then I know you said earlier, I had helped in the founding of another nonprofit previously 3 years ago during COVID.
Mm-hmm.
That's at Neighborhood United. But the at name is at Neighborhood NEIGHBORHOODUN. And that's all the ats on Instagram or Twitter. That's the at names, and you can
Okay.
follow all those pages.
Okay. I'm gonna have all that. I'm gonna put all that in the description for everybody to see. But last question, you now, you sitting here today, what have you learned about yourself mentally and spiritually?
Sheesh.
I like this question. I always ask everybody.
Yeah. Um, I learned not to make decisions too fast. And taking as much information as I can. I think being a leader, I work with multiple different types of stakeholders. And I have to take all of that into account before taking a decision. It's my employees, it's my board members, it's the stakeholders, the community members we serve, and
Mm-hmm.
some of the external partners and funders that we work with. I gotta take in information from all those sources and make the best information, make the best decisions for my organization, but also the best decisions for my own life. I try to sit and say, hey, how will this impact my personal family, my friends, my career, my job, my community? Because I think I used to, after I kind of got at that college phase of kind of being slow with decision making, I started making a lot of rapid decisions. But there's a middle ground where you're not delaying decisions, but you're taking information and then you try to make the best decision possible. It's not always going to work out, but you have to try to think as best as possible about all the factors and all the stakeholders that come into play before making the decision if you want to be a great leader.
Mm-hmm.
You can just say this is the best thing for me, but I work in community work. Most of it is not about me. So I have to like really think about it in that way. It's about everyone else I serve and I service, and always making sure I'm taking in that feedback. I'm always engaging with them, even at the highest level as executive director. I go to things and I'm talking to directly to people, or I'm gonna be so out of touch that I'm gonna become some of the school staff and administrators that I used to talk about who are so far removed and separated. So really just taking that time to take it all in, like taking life, take it all in and make the best decisions for everybody with that in mind
Mm-hmm.
and how I genuinely feel. So, I mean, I think my spirituality and prayer really helps with that. We pray 5 times a day. When
Mm-hmm.
I'm in prayer and I'm in some of these moments and I'm doing my prayer, some of these thoughts come into my mind and some of these decisions. And I think I'm taking a little pause for my day, and sometimes I get some clarity in those moments because
Mm-hmm.
I get to stop. I'm not taking in any more stimulus, and I get to like just really think about stuff. Like it's 5 times a day that's built in. That's really meditation time for me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying my scriptures and my verses, but I'm also taking a break from everyone and anything. And like I get to think about what ails me, what's troubling me, what problems I have, what challenges, what's going good as well. Not to just stick to the negative, but also what's going well. What should I replicate that's going well? And I'll take some time to think about all these things after prayer, and like that'll kind of help me engage in the next section of my day.
Tell you, Hussein, I think you're gonna help a lot more people than you think you know in this episode. You've helped me. You know what I mean? It's your your transparency and your authenticity is really really helpful, and I'm glad that we were able to get the word out and get some more understanding and clarity of the Muslim religion and the things that's going on that people are have a closed mind to. You know what I mean? And just it's always a negative idea.
Yeah.
When we look at the Muslim community and most and all the time it's everybody is just alike.
Yeah, no, I think you hit it on the nose. Like, I mean, obviously, like, after kind of coming into leadership positions, you talk about yourself a lot, and like you have
Mm-hmm.
to learn to kind of be more vulnerable with communities. That's how you're gonna connect. And obviously, like my work really being tied to my religion, it's like really powerful. But obviously it takes its toll. Like I know, especially during this time with conflict and genocide that's happening in Palestine, it really is affecting my community. So helping my community navigate that space, doing that work towards calling for ceasefire with elected officials, it's some of the most painstaking work because this like literally that's attached to this activation.
Mm-hmm.
But we do the work. We're part of the protests. We're part of the movements, the vigils, in order to bring awareness to problems in the Muslim community. Right now, it's specifically Palestine. Next month, it may be a different country. It may be
Mm-hmm.
Syria, but there's always an issue. And like, community-based organizations, we always have to kind of be able to speak up and be the mouthpieces for community and
Mm-hmm.
help them and show them how to advocate for themselves. And I'm thankful for my journey. I'm thankful for my family for instilling me with my cultural norms and practices that made me realize all I have is community. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not in this world by myself.
Mm-hmm. And we definitely, me and you are definitely gonna have to stay in touch. We definitely gonna have to network together to continue to talk about this stuff because it's something that needs to continue to be on the ear of people so they can continue to think about it. But Hussein, I appreciate you today, man, for jumping on this podcast with me, man. I appreciate you.
Nah, thank you so much, Ryan. I really appreciate your time, and thank you for all your thoughtful questions. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you know, just to your horn right now, it's I didn't know what I was coming into when I'm like, all right, I'm gonna sit down the
Yeah,
podcast
yeah.
with Ryan. But like, man, some of these questions really took me back to my own childhood, my
Mm-hmm.
upbringing. It's like really thinking intentionally about my own life. So like I really
Hmm.
appreciate that walk down memory lane.
Yeah, you too, baby.